The city skyline gleamed under the weight of midnight, towers of steel and glass piercing the clouds. At the very top of the tallest building, where most lights had gone dark, one office still burned brightly. Inside sat Ethan Cole, the youngest CEO to ever lead coal industries. To the world, he was ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable. To his employees, he was fear itself in a tailored suit. Meetings ended the moment he raised a brow. Careers ended if he raised his voice. But when the world wasn't watching, Ethan carried a secret no one could imagine. What city are you watching from today? If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe for more real stories about extraordinary people. The echoes of childhood had never left him. He remembered the footsteps, first heavy, deliberate, echoing down a long hallway. A small boy sat in a dimly lit room, clutching a broken toy car in his tiny hands. His heart thudded so loudly it drowned every other sound. The door burst open. His father's shadow filled the doorway. Ethan, the voice thundered. Tears stung the boy's eyes. His lips trembled. Please, don't hit me, he whispered. But mercy never came. Those nights carved scars into his soul. Scars that no one could see but that shaped everything he would one day become. His mother cried silently in the background, too fragile to intervene. And Ethan learned a truth that would define his life. Weakness had no place in this world. By the time he grew older, he had already built his armor. At school, Ethan never cried. He never asked for help. He excelled not because he loved learning, but because failure meant punishment. In college, he was the one who studied when everyone else partied. While others laughed and built friendships, he sharpened his mind like a blade. Fear drove him, but it also fueled him. No one will ever have power over me again, he promised himself. And with that vow, Ethan Cole climbed faster than anyone else. He devoured every challenge, outsmarted every rival, and crushed anyone who dared to stand in his way. At 32, he was a name spoken in boardrooms with both admiration and dread. Yet power had its price. Employees avoided his gaze. Assistants prayed not to be called into his office. Even success tasted bitter, for no amount of money, no headline, no empire could quiet the voice that still haunted him in the dead of night. It happened again one late evening. Reports and contracts littered his desk, but his eyes blurred as the sound of those footsteps returned, not in the hallway outside his office, but inside his head. He froze. His chest tightened. His hand trembled until the pen slipped to the floor. And then the words broke free. Decades old, but fresh as ever. Please, don't hit me. The powerful CEO buried his face in his hands. For a moment, he was no longer Ethan Cole, the man the city feared. He was only the little boy who had once begged for mercy. Tears fell silently onto the polished wood of his desk. No one saw. No one ever would. Or so he thought, because soon, someone would step into his life. Someone ordinary, someone unexpected. A single father with nothing to his name but quiet, strength and kindness, and that man would change everything. The morning sun spilled gold over the glass towers. But for Daniel Hayes, mornings were never easy. His alarm rang before dawn, yet he was already awake, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment. Beside him, in the next room, his 8-year-old daughter Lily slept soundly. Her school uniform hung neatly on the chair, patched in places where the fabric had worn thin. Daniel smiled faintly at the sight. She was his entire world. Life hadn't been kind to him. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him to raise Lily alone. Since then, he had worked every job he could, find construction, deliveries, night shifts, anything to keep food on the table. But jobs came and went, and stability always felt like a dream just out of reach. That morning, he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the only suit he owned. The tie was slightly frayed, the jacket too old, but it was all he had. Today was different. Today was his chance at something steady. Coal Industries, he had applied weeks ago for an entry-level position. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but the company was stable. If he could land the job, he could finally give Lily the security she deserved. The lobby of Coal Industries buzzed with quiet tension. Employees moved quickly, heads down, like shadows darting past the rays of morning light. Daniel noticed the silence more than anything. No casual chatter, no laughter. The air itself seemed heavy, as though fear had seeped into the very walls. First day, the receptionist asked softly. Daniel nodded, adjusting his tie nervously. Good luck, she whispered, her tone carrying more warning than encouragement. By noon, Daniel sat in a small office, being handed a stack of files by a supervisor who barely looked him in the eye. You'll handle data entries, reports, scheduling. Don't be late. And the man's voice dropped. Whatever you do, don't get on Mr. Cole's bad side. Daniel frowned slightly, but nodded. He had heard rumors about the CEO's temper, about the fear that kept everyone in line. But rumors never scared him. Life had already thrown him worse. He thought of Lily's smile, the way she hugged him every morning before school, whispering, "You can do it, Dad." That was all the strength he needed. That evening, fate set the stage. Daniel was leaving late, files still in his hands, when he passed by the CEO's office. The door, usually sealed shut, stood slightly ajar. A faint light spilled into the hallway. He froze. Inside, Ethan Cole sat at his desk, his head buried in his hands. His shoulders trembled not in anger, but in something Daniel recognized instantly. Pain, and then he heard it. The words, soft, broken, escaping into the silence. Please, don't hit me. Daniel's heart clenched. He had seen soldiers whisper those words in war documentaries. He had seen children cry them in shelters. But never a man like this, never a man the world called powerful. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He only stood there, watching, as a truth unfolded before him, beneath the armor of power. Ethan Cole was bleeding, and though Daniel didn't know it yet, that moment was the beginning. The beginning of how an ordinary single dad would change everything for a man who had forgotten what it meant to be human. The next morning, Ethan Cole walked into the office as though the previous night had never happened. His suit was flawless, his expression unreadable, his presence sharp enough to cut the air. To his employees, he was the same man they fit in, yielding, untouchable. But Daniel Hayes, standing by his desk with a fresh stack of reports, could not forget what he had seen. The image of the mighty CEO, trembling, whispering words like a frightened child, burned in his mind. He hadn't told anyone. He never would. But something inside him shifted. For the first time, Daniel didn't see a tyrant in Ethan Cole. He saw a man trapped in his own wounds. It didn't take long for their paths to cross. Daniel had been working late, finishing numbers that others had abandoned in fear of deadlines. His desk light burned while most of the floor remained dark. Suddenly, the sound of polished shoes clicked across the marble floor. "Why are you still here?" Ethan's voice was low, cold. Daniel looked up. "Reports needed finishing. I didn't want the team to fall behind." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you just work slower than everyone else." Most employees would have apologized. They would have lowered their heads, muttered "yes, sir," and let the insult sting. But Daniel wasn't like most employees. "I work until it's done right," he replied calmly. "Not fast, right?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. No one had ever spoken to Ethan Cole that way, not without shaking. But Daniel's voice carried no fear, only honesty. Ethan studied him, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then he turned away sharply. "Don't disappoint me." Days turned into weeks. Ethan tested him: harsh deadlines, impossible tasks, criticism sharper than knives. But Daniel never wavered. He didn't flinch, didn't break. At night, he still went home to Lily, cooked her dinner, helped with her homework, and tucked her in with stories. Word spread quietly across the office floor: "The new guy doesn't fear Cole." And that truth was like a stone thrown into still water, rippling through everything. The clash came one Friday afternoon. Daniel approached Ethan's office. Hesitation in his steps, but determination in his eyes. "My daughter's school has a recital tonight," Daniel began carefully. "She's been practicing for weeks. I'd like to leave an hour early to be there." Ethan didn't look up from his desk. "No," Daniel blinked. "Sir, I've already completed the reports." "There's nothing." "I said no," Ethan snapped, his voice rising. "Do you think you're special because you work harder than the others? You don't get exceptions. You work when I say you work." For the first time, anger flared in Daniel's eyes. He stepped forward. "With all due respect, Mr. Cole, I won't let my daughter stand alone on that stage. She's 8 years old. She's all I have." The words cut through the air like lightning. Ethan's hand froze mid-signature. His gaze lifted slowly, meeting Daniel's with a sharpness that hid something else, something raw. "Leave, Ethan," whispered. Daniel clenched his fists. He expected to be fired. Maybe he even braced for it. But then he saw the slightest tremor in Ethan's hands, the way his jaw tightened, the shadow that flickered across his face. It wasn't anger. It was fear. It was the same fear Daniel had heard that night through the crack in the office door. Ethan leaned back, exhaling shakily. For just a second, his mask slipped, and Daniel glimpsed the truth. The tyrant wasn't punishing him. He was reliving something buried deep. Daniel didn't move. He didn't apologize. He simply said, quietly but firmly, "I'll be back tomorrow morning, earlier than anyone else. But tonight, I'm going to my daughter." And with that, he walked out. Ethan sat in silence long after the door closed, his pen motionless, his mind caught in a storm he could no longer control. That night, for the first time in years, Ethan Cole wondered what it would feel like to be someone like Daniel Hayes, a man with nothing, yet somehow, everything. The following Monday, Ethan arrived at the office expecting anger to surge back the moment he saw Daniel Hayes. Employees whispered as they watched the new hire walk through the glass doors, certain that he had signed his own dismissal by defying the CEO. But Ethan said nothing. Daniel went straight to work, calm as ever. He didn't flinch when people stared at him with disbelief. He didn't explain himself. He didn't need to. When Ethan passed by his desk that morning, their eyes met for the briefest second. Instead of fear, Daniel's gaze carried something Ethan couldn't define: respect, maybe, or something even rarer. It unsettled him more than defiance ever could. That evening, the building had emptied, except for a few scattered employees. Ethan found himself lingering outside Daniel's small cubicle. Papers were neatly stacked, and on the desk sat a small picture frame, a little girl with bright eyes and a toothy grin. Holding her father's hand, Ethan stared at it longer than he meant to. "She's my daughter." Daniel's voice came from behind him. He had returned with a cup of coffee. Tired but smiling. "Her name's Lily. She keeps me going." Ethan straightened quickly, adjusting his cuffs. "You shouldn't leave personal items on your desk. It's unprofessional." Daniel only chuckled softly. "Maybe, but it reminds me why I'm here. Otherwise, this place, it can eat you alive." Ethan wanted to snap back, to reassert the wall between them, but instead, he walked away in silence. The image of that little girl lingering in his mind. Over the next weeks, things began to shift. Ethan still barked orders, still demanded excellence. But Daniel's presence had an effect no one expected. When deadlines loomed, Daniel encouraged his team quietly, keeping spirits steady. When tensions rose, he absorbed the pressure without complaint. And sometimes, when Ethan lashed out, Daniel didn't shrink, he simply stood there, calm, unshaken, as though he understood something others did not. One night, Ethan left his office late and saw Daniel sitting alone, working through spreadsheets. Without a word, Ethan placed a file on his desk. "Don't stay too long," Ethan muttered, almost awkwardly. "You'll need your strength tomorrow." Daniel looked up, surprised, then smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir." It was the smallest exchange, but to Ethan, it felt like a crack opening in a wall he had spent decades fortifying. The true turning point came on a rainy evening. The storm outside rattled the windows of coal industries. Ethan was reviewing a presentation when he heard laughter echo faintly through the hallway. He frowned, stepping out of his office. There, in the break room, Daniel sat with Lily, who had been dropped off after school because Daniel couldn't find childcare. She sat coloring on a piece of paper while her father explained numbers from a report in a way that sounded more like a bedtime story than business. Ethan froze at the doorway. He hadn't heard that sound pure, innocent laughter in his building for years. Lily noticed him first. Her eyes widened, but instead of shrinking back, she held up her drawing proudly. "Look, Mr. I drew a castle." Daniel started to apologize. "Sir, I didn't." She had nowhere to go, but Ethan held up a hand, silencing him. Slowly, he stepped closer, his eyes on the paper. For the first time in years, something softened in his voice. "It's beautiful," Lily grinned. Daniel watched quietly, stunned, and Ethan, without realizing it, felt something shift inside him, a warmth he hadn't known since childhood. That night, as Ethan drove home, he couldn't shake the image of the little girl's smile, or the way Daniel looked at her with fierce, unwavering love. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry his wounds alone. The following weeks passed with an unfamiliar quiet in coal industries. Employees whispered that the CEO had changed just slightly, but noticeably, his voice wasn't as sharp, his steps weren't as heavy, and sometimes, unbelievably, he even paused before speaking. But Ethan Cole himself was restless. Every night, when he returned to his vast empty penthouse, silence pressed down on him like a weight. The laughter of Lily haunted him, echoing in corners where only his father's angry shouts used to live. One evening, Ethan found himself standing outside the office long after midnight. The city lights shimmered below, a reminder of everything he had built, and everything it had cost him. He poured himself a drink, but his hands trembled. He set the glass down, untouched. For the first time in years, he admitted it to himself. He was lonely, broken, afraid. The breaking point came during a high-stakes board meeting. Numbers weren't adding up, tensions were running high, and one of the executives made a careless mistake. Ethan's temper flared, his voice thundered, slamming the table, sending everyone shrinking back. Everyone, except Daniel. Calmly, Daniel stood. "Sir, that's enough." The room froze. Ethan's fury rose like a tide, but Daniel's eyes held steady, firm, yet compassionate. "You're not angry at him," he said quietly, gesturing at the frightened executive. "You're angry at the ghosts you're still carrying." The words cut through Ethan like glass. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For a moment, the boardroom was silent except for the sound of his uneven breathing. Then, without a word, Ethan walked out. That night, Daniel found him in the empty office, sitting in the dark. The city lights poured in, but Ethan looked smaller than ever before, like a man still trapped in the shadow of a cruel father. Daniel didn't speak at first. He just sat across from him, giving him space. Finally, Ethan's voice cracked. "When I was a boy, my father used to—" His words broke, but the pain in his eyes said the rest. "I swore I'd never be weak again, that no one would ever hurt me. And so you became him," Daniel said softly, not as judgment, but as truth. Ethan's hands shook. He buried his face in them, a sound escaping that no one at Coal Industries had ever heard, the sound of a man breaking. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not him. You don't have to be." For the first time, Ethan believed it might be true. Weeks later, things truly began to change. Ethan still ran his company with discipline, but now, there was a difference in his tone. Instead of fear, people started working with motivation. Instead of silence, the halls carried life again. One afternoon, Ethan walked into the break room and found Lily coloring at the table again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He sat down beside her. "What are you drawing today?" he asked. "A family," Lily said brightly, showing him stick figures holding hands under a shining sun. She added another figure beside them and scribbled carefully. "That's you." Something in Ethan's chest broke open and healed all at once. He smiled, not the cold, corporate smirk his employees feared, but a genuine, human smile. Daniel, watching from the doorway, saw it, and in that moment, he knew the CEO wasn't the same man anymore. Ethan Cole was still scarred, still imperfect, but now thanks to a single dad and a little girl's laughter, he was finally free. Thanks for being here till the end. If this story moved you, give it a like, subscribe for more real moments, and share your thoughts. I read every comment.